just days ago, the fragile trade relationship between the United States and Canada took a sudden and dramatic turn. The U.S. government, under President Donald Trump, announced an aggressive increase in tariffs on Canadian goods from an already steep 25% to a staggering 35%. This sharp move sent shockwaves through the business communities, governments, and citizens on both sides of the border. What started as a tense negotiation over trade policies now threatens to spiral into a full-blown trade battle, with enormous consequences for two of the world's closest economic partners. The White House justified this escalation by pointing to what it called Canada's ongoing failure to engage in meaningful talks and its retaliatory measures. President Trump himself claimed that, despite Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney reaching out, no direct dialogue occurred to resolve the growing tensions. Yet, Prime Minister Carney appeared remarkably composed during a recent press conference in British Columbia, highlighting Canada's vast economic ties with the U.S., including Canada's position as the second-largest investor in the United States. This tariff escalation doesn't just represent a disagreement between two governments. It threatens the delicate economic balance that supports millions of jobs and billions in trade. At the heart of this crisis lies CUSMA, the trilateral trade agreement meant to guarantee free and fair commerce across North America. But now its very survival is in question. As both nations brace for what lies ahead, businesses, workers, and consumers are left wondering, what does this tariff battle mean for their futures? And can CUSMA survive the storm? The announcement of the 35% tariffs came as a shock to many in the trade community. But it was the culmination of months of mounting tensions. The U.S. administration accused Canada of dragging its feet in negotiations and retaliating against earlier tariffs by imposing its own duties on American goods, ranging from ketchup to building materials. This back and forth, sometimes called a tit-for-tat trade war, has been simmering beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. President Trump's aggressive tariff strategy is part of a broader push to renegotiate trade terms across multiple fronts, aiming to tilt the balance more in America's favor. For Canadian industries, particularly steel, aluminum, and copper sectors, the new 35% tariffs have created immediate financial strain. Job losses and reduced output are real possibilities if these tariffs persist, affecting thousands of workers and their families. Despite the pressure, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has maintained a diplomatic and measured tone. At a press conference in British Columbia, he emphasized the deep economic ties between the two countries and the importance of finding a solution that works for all parties. Carney's calm demeanor masks a strategic resolve to avoid rushing into a deal that could compromise Canada's economic interests. As the August 1st tariff deadline passed, both countries face a critical crossroads. The coming days and weeks will test the resilience of the Canada-U.S. trade relationship like never before. The 35% tariff increase strikes at the core of North America's economic framework. But to understand the full impact, it's important to grasp the scale of trade between the U.S. and Canada. These two neighbors share one of the largest and most complex trading relationships in the world. Canada is the second largest investor in the United States globally, with a population of 40 million deeply entwined in U.S. markets. Prime Minister Carney pointed to this immense economic interdependence as a reason for caution. A breakdown in trade would not just hurt one side, it would trigger a natural decline in business activity on both sides of the border. Companies rely heavily on integrated supply chains where parts, materials, and products move freely across borders every day. Disrupting this flow threatens industries from automotive, manufacturing to agriculture. The tariffs hit some of Canada's key export sectors hardest, with steel, aluminum, and copper now facing a combined tariff burden of 50%. These are not just raw materials. They form the backbone of Canadian manufacturing and construction. The stakes are clear. Prolonged tariffs could reduce output, cause job losses, and slow economic growth. For Canada, the challenge is balancing the need to protect its industries without provoking further escalation. Carney's message is firm but measured. Canada will not be pushed into a deal that sacrifices its long-term economic stability. CUSMA, the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, was designed to be a modern framework ensuring free, fair, and tariff-free trade across North America. It replaced NAFTA, with updated rules to reflect the current economic realities and maintain cooperation between the three nations. However, the recent tariff hikes directly contradict the agreement's core principles. While Canada enjoys tariff-free access to approximately 85% of its exports under CUSMA, the sudden imposition of 35% tariffs raises questions about the pact's durability. Is this an aggressive negotiation tactic by the U.S., or is CUSMA's foundation beginning to crumble under political pressure? Finance Minister François Philippe Champagne's statement that Canada is seeking trade partners it can trust underscores growing doubts about the reliability of trilateral cooperation. Meetings between Canadian, Mexican, and foreign affairs officials highlight a shared concern about the direction of U.S. trade policy. With Mexico closely watching the situation, the future of CUSMA appears uncertain. Trust, a fundamental element of any trade agreement, is under strain. The weeks ahead will reveal whether this pact can survive, a test unlike any it has faced before. Caught in the middle of this escalating dispute, Mexico faces a complex challenge. As the third member of CUSMA, Mexico depends heavily on both Canadian and U.S. trade flows, especially in sectors like automotive manufacturing, electronics, and agriculture. Disruptions between its northern neighbors could reverberate through Mexico's economy, threatening jobs and growth. President Claudia Sheinbaum has emphasized the importance of maintaining trilateral cooperation to preserve economic stability. Recent meetings with Canadian and U.S. officials have focused on navigating these tensions without fracturing the trade agreement. Mexico's position is delicate. Aligning too closely with either the U.S. or Canada risks alienating the other, potentially isolating the country economically. The prospect of a trade war forces Mexico into a careful balancing act, pushing for dialogue and resolution, while preparing for possible fallout. The outcome of this dispute won't just shape Canada and the U.S., but will significantly impact Mexico's economic future as well. The North American trade triangle depends on cooperation, and the current conflict threatens to test that bond severely. The effects of this tariff battle extend far beyond government, negotiations, and corporate boardrooms. Consumers on both sides of the border face the very real prospect of higher prices on everyday goods. When tariffs raise the cost of raw materials like steel and aluminum, those costs trickle down, making everything from cars to household appliances more expensive. For businesses, especially small and medium enterprises reliant on cross-border supply chains, the uncertainty is crippling. Sudden increases in tariffs disrupt production schedules, increase costs, and squeeze profit margins. Many companies are forced to delay investments or even cut jobs to manage the financial strain. This environment breeds caution and hesitancy, dampening economic growth and innovation. Investors become wary, and the broader business confidence needed to fuel expansion falters. The human cost is clear. Workers face job insecurity, families feel the pinch of rising prices, and entrepreneurs must navigate a volatile market. The tariff conflict has become more than a political dispute. It has become a pressing economic and social challenge, affecting millions. Looking ahead, the future of CUSMA and North American trade hangs in the balance. The Trump administration's hardline approach aims to use economic pressure and tight deadlines to force concessions from Canada. But Prime Minister Carney's firm stance suggests Canada will not yield easily to such tactics. The risk of prolonged disruption is high. Integrated supply chains that have fueled decades of growth across the continent could unravel, causing lasting damage to industries and economies. Mexico's role as a mediator and stabilizer may grow in importance, but the core tension remains between the U.S. and Canada. Businesses, consumers, and governments will be watching closely as talks hopefully resume. Will the two leaders find common ground, or will this tariff battle escalate into a broader trade war? What's certain is that the economic future of millions depends on the outcome. The world's longest undefended border faces one of its toughest tests yet, and the stakes have never been higher.